And we are back, episode 221. Adir, just having a go at me for not being in touch with the Australian news, being over here in London.
Well, no,
I'm
you
out
are
of
a
it,
man
out
of
of the
the
loop, apparently.
you are a man of the people. I would never tell you that
We
you
know
are in
that.
touch.
That
But
was after
there's been
my famous EasyJet flight this week
is that you took an EasyJet flight?
from Luton Airport, no less. I told you
Oh,
this.
that is what you
I
were.
was giving you live commentary.
You didn't look up a thing on YouTube that I told you to look up about how they changed the name of Luton
Oh, I
Airport?
forgot, actually. No, maybe Mike can put it on the show notes so I can see it.
You can, yeah, Michael put a link in there, but there was a prankster that did this prank. It was actually very funny. EasyJet, has there ever been an airline more inappropriately named? Like, it is a jet, I'll give them that part of it, but the easy, anything about it you found easy? Being frustrated, that's easy.
I actually found that great. Like, it's
Do you have no
like,
luggage?
Yeah, no luggage.
I
almost never have luggage. But you see, this subject of a takeover fight now. So there was a UK private equity firm. I think it's a TPG or KKR is now involved, and it's about $10-11 billion US takeover fight. So it shows how valuable. Three of the most valuable airlines in the world: Southwest, EasyJet, Ryanair, all discount carriers. Obviously, they either go really well or die, as we see with many Australian discount carriers. And Spirit, I think, was it Spirit or Sprint in the US recently?
Spirit, yes, exactly.
Spirit, the yellow airline. So it's a high risk, high return gamble. But as a customer, I actually found it completely fine.
Well, I'll tell you my views on these no frills, so-called no frills airlines. And by the way, people think Jetstar is bad in Australia. I agree with that. It's dreadful, but it's great compared to some of the experiences I've had on overseas ones. So Spirit, I would have called drain my spirit airways.
Spirit was much loved, though, funnily enough.
Well, not
people were devastated when it
asked me.
Yeah, because you fly private, so it's a bit different for the high
I can only
flyers.
say I've never, ever in my life flown in a private jet, and hopefully I never will. So, but I will say...
That's where we need John Stenshalt on the show, because he's the private flyer amongst the Contrarians family.
Well, the thing about Spirit is what I like about these businesses is they open up travel to vastly more people. Ironically, the people that mostly buy tickets on these airlines are the same people that say that the world is about to end in 15 seconds due to a climate catastrophe. There's some hypocrisy overlap going on there. So that was Spirit. EasyJet, it's definitely better when you don't have luggage. It's even better if you don't have yourself and you don't have to be involved in boarding. Like that would be just buying a ticket and not turning up is the way it works most efficiently. But
are you talking about the days where you couldn't get reserved seats? You had to run on to get their seats. I agree, that was pretty bad.
Give me like a 20-second rundown of the experience now. So you buy the ticket online, you get to the
airport. Same as Virgin. It's no different. It's completely fine. In fact, it was even better. Can I tell you what was better? They're fine, but I think what you can do now is, you know how the issue with Qantas and Virgin flight, every flight on a single aisle plane, a 737 or a 320 is there's very limited cabin space in terms of bags. Unless you bought early, if you got a bag, you got real problems. And we see
overhead, you mean?
Wandering up. Overhead bags. And this is not a flight of the airline. This is not a fault of the airline. This is a fault of people now bringing on to carry on. So what? And I actually booked a row one. It wasn't actually that more of a premium, but I was wanting to get out first and all that. So I booked row one in EasyJet. And if you're in row one, there's 2 baggage containers just for row one, so you have no stress about you can be blast to board, and there's like my stuff was sloshing around. There was so much space up there.
Did the ticket cost more?
Like 20 or 30. It was a minimal extra charge. It was still way cheaper than flying BA.
Can I just give you a little recap that I feel like you might need on how capitalism works? When you pay more money, they give you better stuff. And so, like, the reason you had so much space is because you paid more money. The exception, by the way, is on some of the 737s, the very first overhead compartment is not a full height compartment. And so it always amuses me watching people trying to deal with that, and they can't figure out how to get their regulation size fully stuffed suitcase in because it doesn't go in.
Well, the reason why this was one would call an arbitrage was because I paid half as much I would have paid on BA or Iberian or any of the full service carriers. And on BA, like on Virgin and Qantas, you don't have that reserved cabin, overhead cabin stuff. So even if you can be flying in 1A in business and part of Chairman's Lounge, and you still can be stuffed with the overhead cabin, versus here where you pay the discounted amount, a small increment, still way less than you pay on full service, and you get the overheads. That's why it was so good.
Now, I want to update you on some Australian stuff you might not have been aware of. I'm sure you read about it, but let me tell you the vibe on the ground on this stuff, because you're obviously in London. So Telstra had a bit of a problem this week. Did you?
I did notice this. I did notice this.
I've got two things to say about Telstra's problem this week. The first is, there was a complete, what it felt to me like a complete outage of all data and call services. You're not with Telstra, are you, Mike?
No, I am not with Telstra.
So I will say the following sentence. I am not only with Telstra. What do I mean by that?
Do you have two phones?
No, but I have two SIM cards. So I've got a Telstra SIM.
Anybody can just jump and buy an eSIM when this happens.
I understand that. Yes, you are correct. Anyone that has a phone that can take eSIMs can buy an eSIM. That's right. So some of the
which is almost everyone. I call it 95% of people have this capability.
And so about a year ago, I was, like in Brighton, there's typically some problems with reception the closer you get to the beach. Basically, people don't want to put towers on the beach, so you get no reception. And so I'm with Telstra, and I'm like, when I'm walking on the beach, I can't even get Telstra reception, so I'm going to go and get I forget which carrier I was with.
You got Optus, didn't you?
No, I got a Vodafone, but I got a Vodafone reseller. I think it literally cost me $12. It's not Kogan, but I should swap to Kogan. But like it's $12 a month or something like that for data and calls. Now, occasionally I use it because I never want to be like, if sometimes Telstra will be low on data, usually like reception, I can't do data, I'll swap to this other one.
Good idea. Yeah.
But when I had this outage, it was incredible. Like I had no outage because I just swapped to their data. Yeah,
so
I don't often use their call.
Yeah.
And so
good.
I think
everybody should get this, really.
Yes. I think everybody should get this. Like the thing is this, Telstra, Optus, they're the two main carriers in Australia, networks. They've both had terrible outages that have affected O services as it happens. But if you can't trust them, you can't trust anyone. And so I think everyone needs to have two networks connected to their phone, because the likelihood of an outage on your primary network is actually pretty high. And like Vodafone, let's not let them off the hook. I feel like they should be the most likely to have outages. They're not, but their coverage seems to be worse to me, but except in Brighton Beach. But anyway,
looking after the billionaires is pretty important.
So I think that's a good hack, the $12 eSIM to get another network. What do you think about that, Mike? Have I sold you on the hack or not?
Oh, seems like a fair bit of hassle. I mean, I've actually never been affected by any of these outages. But
who are you with?
I'm with Optus, but I actually don't remember being affected the time they were out either.
Well, I'm surprised by that, and you should have been affected because they had a huge outage.
Maybe I've just burnt it from my memory, but I don't remember being affected by it.
Well, the Telstra outage that stopped the trains running as well in Melbourne, so that was handy. So you're free, your free/half price public transport that you love, Adam. Well, that wasn't running because of the Telstra outage for 2 days.
I saw a friend of the pod, Jacinta Allen, possibly the worst leader in Australian history, was lashing fire and brimstone over Telstra. And I thought Luco, another friend of the pod, made a great point on Twitter saying, what kind of horrendous system relies on one carrier without any contingency? If the problem isn't, well, Telstra obviously aren't faultless here, but the problem for the Victorian trains going down wasn't Telstra. It was because they had no ability to switch to another carrier like you do. So if the trains had half the foresight Adir Schiffman had, there wouldn't have been an issue. So this is yet another failure of Victorian government to simply provide basic goods and services to long-suffering Victorian taxpayers. How incompetent could these guys be?
Agreed, sold. But on the next, so there was a great article by Anthony McDonald where he was talking about the response of all of this. So Vicky Brady, is that the name of the CEO? She was overseas on a holiday. And to be fair, she found out about this after a couple of hours when it was escalated to her and responded to it quickly and designated Michael Ackland, who I happen to know. I mean, I met him a few times. And he's the Telstra CFO and acting CEO. And he stepped up. And it was actually handled pretty appropriately, putting aside the outage, which needs to be investigated. The way they handled this is, I thought, pretty appropriate, to be honest with you.
Yep.
Annika Wells, is that the name of the communications minister?
The freeloading Annika Wells?
Well, I didn't know that was her official title, but there you go.
I actually think it's part of her title in Hansard now.
Well, the thing is that she came out and basically decided to do a trial by media / trial by government soundbite against Telstra.
In fairness, it was hardly just Annika. They were lining up 10 deep to have a go at Telstra.
Well, she's the communications minister.
Yeah.
And the Telstra share, and the point that Anthony McDonald made is the Telstra share price hadn't fallen at all until Annika Wells came out and said, we're going to hold your feet to the fire. Now, I don't that is a funny saying, hold your feet to the fire, because it's hard to know which fire she was referring to here. Does she mean that she's going to just try and jawbone the share price into a fall? Does it mean she's going to try and jawbone Vicky Brady into being fired as CEO? That's not going to work. Does it mean she's going to launch a formal investigation? I mean, I don't have an issue with that if there were O services that collapsed, but I think this idea of governments trying to inflict pain unfairly or prematurely on private enterprise in order to jack up their own ratings, it's terrible. And this is what I enjoyed about the article that Anthony wrote. He said, after what the government did on CGT, basically every investor in Australia hates the government. And so unless you're an industry super fund, maybe you don't, right? But
because industry super funds don't pay tax, so they're fine. Yeah. Of course they don't care.
The people that get paid by them, paid well, presumably they have their own investments, so their CGT will be going up. So maybe even privately, they're not too happy about it either. And so the thing is this, all of these investors are so angry with the government today, they're not going to do the government's bidding for them. And arguably, if the government comes out and says, we should go and hold Vicky Brady's feet to the fire, the institutional investors will actually throw water on the fire and put it out because they're so unenthusiastic about supporting the government. So I totally agree in this case. Like, there is no indication so far that Telstra did anything terrible or Vicky Brady did anything terrible to cause this. And I think the idea of having due process and investigating it properly and, giving people the benefit of the doubt before executing them, I think that it would be nice if we go back to these liberal democratic values, which include due process, which seems to have been swept aside in the last 5 to 10 years. That's how I feel about this.
I think you're right. I think the whole thing's, and it's not just, by the way, the Labor Party that jumped on, the Greens, of course, jumped on. I think the Liberals even jumped. I think everybody, is now this unedifying pile-on every time there's a situation where a company may or may not be at fault. And let's not defending Telstra 100%. But I think Vicky Brady has been outstanding here. She found out at 4:30 a.m. She jumped on the next plane within 12 hours, I think, was back in Australia. If you look at Scott Galloway's sort of rules for crisis management, it's get the top person to get involved, which she did, apologise profusely and overcorrect, which I think they've done. So I think they've done I think Optus didn't do a great job early in the year with when Kelly and the subsequent issue, but I think Telstra did literally everything they could. Clearly, no one wants these incidents to happen. It sounds like somebody may have passed away as a result of this, but this was an older person who may well have died anyway, so we don't know if there's causation correlation issues here. But and we saw this in COVID. Every time we can't look at mass policy based on individual instances. Like, bad things do happen, and it's terrible for the family involved and all that kind of stuff. But probably the biggest problem with COVID is we took individual circumstances and then did this mass policy. Some large people were dying, so let's lock up schools. Like, it was completely the wrong policy and destroyed kids' education. We're still feeling that from inflation and kids' education, all that kind of stuff 5 years later. So we've learned nothing from COVID. As soon as something goes wrong, as soon as one person passes away, we suddenly start holding people to the fire, as you said. It's so ridiculous. It means, why would anybody want to lead these business? I know they're paid well, but why would anybody lead a business when some random router in Vicky Brady's job isn't to check 10 million routers in data centers around the world? That's absolutely not her role. Like, to blame a CEO for what was essentially something that maybe it was avoidable, maybe it wasn't, we don't know. But the rush to pile on every time something bad happens, and politicians need to get their name in the headlines and to blame a business person, even though the business person may not be at fault, I think was terrible. I think Telstra did, and I'm not one to usually defend CEOs, I'm usually the opposite, but I think in this case they did as good a job as one could in the circumstances. And these politicians have just gotten worse and worse every single year. They seem to be just desperate to get in the media any way they can.
Okay, so before I go, let me move on to because we're talking about CEOs. Let me talk about something. I always want to call out like the nonsense that comes out of CEOs' mouths. These meaningless words when they I think I told you off about it the other day. I guess you're a CEO and you said something on this podcast, and I was like, let's just rephrase that into the English language. And so I want to read something to you before we come back to another Australian story. This is from, I don't know if you've been following what's been happening with the acquisition of Twinkies in the US. Have you been following that acquisition?
Very hard. I saw an article about it, but I think Twinkies aren't super high on my list, to be honest.
Well, they should be, because firstly, they were bought by a business called JM Smucker. If for no other reason, that has got to be one of the greatest names of a business.
What's JM Smucker's got? They've got, what's their hero product? It's
they own one of the big peanut butter brands in the US.
Oh, they do have a product that's a really well known, it's like a Twinkies.
Is it Uncrustables?
Yes, that is their big product.
Smucker's Uncrustables?
Their big product is Uncrustables, which is, well, I want to tell you about these Uncrustables before. Well, firstly, let me give you the quote from the CEO, and then let me tell you some stuff that's going on about this, because I think it's very fascinating as kind of a little insight into a fundamental food change that's going on in the world that you've spoken about. So things haven't gone well for the Twinkies acquisition, for reasons I'll discuss in a second. This was the Chief Financial Officer's comments about how what's happened with the Twinkies acquisition and how they've responded. I'm going to give you this quote by Tucker Marshall. Is there any more American name than Tucker? So this is there any more white American name than Tucker?
He's sure he's got a quarterback.
Here is the quote. We did have some internal execution issues that we've really right-sized and worked through over the last fiscal year. So that's meaningless. That is a sentence that is devoid of any content. I'm not sure how you right-size internal execution issues. I think you execute the people internally that were responsible for those issues. Is that what right-sizing firing people, I guess, might be the answer to that?
I assume that meant firing people. That's how it sounded like.
Yeah. And then he follows on with so it's not a CEO, it's a CFO. He follows on with this. Really, what we've seen is just a slowdown. I'm not sure. I mean, the word just there feels like it's going to be doing too much heavy lifting. I don't think any slowdown is called just a slowdown. I think,
so this is the Smucker's guy.
What's that?
This is the Smucker's guy or the Twinkies guy?
Well, Twinkies is bought by Smuckers. So this is the CFO of Smuckers.
Oh, so the acquirers had a bad year, so they're sort of covering up their misfeasance with buying some other company, essentially.
Yeah, they've made some mistakes, and the mistakes are they're kind of excusable mistakes. We just got some integrations and some assumptions wrong. Okay, we get it. But the CFO, what we've seen is just a slowdown. Now, get rid of the word just. It's a disaster. What we've seen is a slowdown. That's what he should have said. I'll tell you what the slowdown is, and you'll agree it's a disaster. And then he says the following: snacking is still important. Indulgent snacking is still important. Important? Well, it's certainly important to you, because if it stops, you're going to go broke. But I'm not sure what it means. Snacking is still important. If you want to make sure that you get diabetes, snacking is definitely still important, especially indulgent snacking. That is a good recipe for diabetes, very important, and heart disease.
I think he means important to its customers. I presume that's what he means.
An important sector of the market, generating lots of revenue. All of those things are true. But this is what, so they had some internal problems of things that went wrong. For example, they mostly sell to supermarkets, and this Twinkie is mostly Twinkies, and Twinkies last for 60 days or something. It's a miracle of modern chemistry and probably not great for your body. And they've got these little mini donuts. I don't know what they're called. I think they're called donuts. I think they're mini donuts. And so they last, I don't know, for the same amount of time, basically. I don't know. If you've ever had, so Jews, Mike, you might not know this, but Jews have this thing called challah. You might know about it. It's like this braided bread. It's like kind of brioche is what I'd call it.
It's got egg. It's got a lot of egg. It's got egg bread, I think it's
whatever it's got in it, you can come back to it 3 weeks later and I think it's still fine, basically.
It's a freak of nature, this stuff.
God knows what's going on there. Twinkies is that, but supercharged. The main Smucker's product is something even more outrageous than that, which is a product called Uncrustables. It should be called Unconsumables as far as I'm concerned. So it's basically a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. They've chopped the crusts off them, chopped them in half, frozen them, put them in the freezer section of the supermarket, and parents buy them for their kids and just whack it into the lunchbox, and this product defrosts over the course of the day, and that is the easiest way to give kids peanut butter and jelly sandwiches without having to make them yourself at 5 times the price it would cost you to get your own knife dirty. This is a $1 billion product line. $1 billion US dollars of revenue.
If you're wondering why the US sort of empire has basically fallen, some might say, oh, it spent too much on military, it spent too much on services. I think the fact that this product is $1 billion product explains all you need to know about the US's downfall.
And so then I had an AI discussion to try to dig into why has Woolworths launched a version of this product if it's $1 billion USD in the US? And there is such a long list of answers. I'm not going to bore you with them. But it begins with nobody eats peanut butter and jelly sandwiches in Australia.
That's true. Yeah, it's very
and that's
American.
the best thing to do. And if you try to do it with meat or cheese, it gets very difficult, and it probably wouldn't be a huge product line in Australia. And so that is their big business. But just to finish,
can I just on the Twinkie thing? What do I know about Twinkies? Like the only real cultural reference I can remember about Twinkies is when Jerry Seinfeld talking about Newman in Seinfeld, and he goes, "Newman's a mystery wrapped in a Twinkie." It's one of the great calls.
Well, I think Twinkies also had their moment in one of those John Belushi type of movies of the 80s, Animal House.
Like Animal House?
Of those,
that was 70s,
where the cops are eating Twinkies. That's like the big.
Oh, it wasn't
Twinkies
Blues
moment.
Brothers, was it?
I don't think
One of the most
it was
overrated
the Blues
movie. That's
Brothers,
one of the most overrated movies ever. That movie.
Overrated. I've watched that movie 45
so
times, I reckon.
Overrated by you potentially.
Well, by the way, I don't know if, just as an aside, do you know there's like some kind of animal walking behind you that looks suspiciously like a deer or something like that?
It's an alpaca.
An alpaca.
Well,
that's fine.
It's an amazing animal, the alpaca. They're the cutest. They're extremely cute and extremely weird looking. There's
why
massive
are they in your
necks.
backyard?
Because they have alpacas here. They've got 3 alpacas. It's like a little mini farm here, I'm at.
Well, that's lovely and a bit disconcerting in your background. I thought it was AI. So this is what's happened with Twinkies. Well, maybe I'll ask you this question. Since 2022, the salty snacks in the US have fallen in revenue a couple of percent. All snacks are down 5%. So this is problematic for the industry. Sweet snacks, which includes things like most of these Twinkies products, which is owned by a company called Hostess. So they bought Hostess, which is the owner of Twinkies. They're down almost 20%. And desserts, which is stuff you buy in the freezer in the supermarket, they're down almost maybe 25% since 2022 in terms of revenue. Yeah. What's going on? 2 things are going on. What do you think?
GLP-1 would be my
That's the first thing that's going on. So basically nobody wants to eat these snacks anymore because they're all taking these injections for GLP. And there's a second thing that's going on as well, which you might call Maha. You know what Maha is?
Maha's Shane Dealey's restaurant, friend of Luxury Escapes.
So that is not that. So that is not the Twinkies problem. I mean, presumably he doesn't serve Twinkies, but like that's not their problem. Make America healthy again. That is the other problem that desserts are having. It is
RFK
almost,
Jr.
If you said in 2022, we think that sweet snacks in the US and desserts are going to fall in revenue 20% over the next 3 years, nobody would have believed you. But that's what's happened. So that is a dramatic effect that is occurring.
And that is a hugely good thing. There's almost not much worse than these things. These high calorie, very little nutritional value. There's nothing good about this stuff. Unless you're a shareholder in Smuckers, there's nothing good about this stuff for society. I think we're very critical of RFK's vaccine absurdities, but in this case, his want for more real natural food is actually a really good. It's a shame he has some really good points and some really terrible points, and the terrible stuff overrides the good stuff. But in this case, this is saving lives, no question. Like the diets of not just Americans, but Western people are horrendous, and this is just incredible news.
Well, this is the story of this American administration. Every decision is either minus or plus 1 trillion standard deviations from the mean in terms of its quality. There is one, just before I finish, I'll give you one more Australian story after this, but there is one category of snack that has rocketed in the last few years. It's a very consequential subcategory. I'll give you a hint. It's to do with something that's in these snacks. Maybe it's been added or fortified into these snacks. What is it?
I'm assuming some sort of glucose, but I can't think of what it could be.
It's not glucose. That is the wrong substrate, I'm going to call it, or the wrong added. Mick Meister, what do you got?
It's
what do you see written on the front of bars?
Protein or something?
Yes.
Oh, it is protein. Yeah.
If you want to sell something today, pour some kind of protein into it. No one's even going to know what protein you put in it. Put whatever you want. It doesn't matter. And then on the front, just write 15 grams of protein.
Yeah.
People will just buy it by the box loads. There's the price of one of the core proteins that's being used in all of these products at the moment. It's gone up 104% in the last year. So, like,
the memory chips of food. It's yes. I've seen that everywhere. I haven't noticed in Australia, but in the UK, I've seen protein everywhere.
Well, it's exactly. You probably haven't noticed it here because you're not here right now. But if you walk,
I was there 2 weeks ago. Like, I can't imagine it's happened in the last 2 weeks.
Why are you not walking through the super? You love the supermarket as much
as
I do.
Walk through. I noticed in the UK straight away everywhere. I haven't noticed in Australia, like to a great degree. Certainly not to the degree I've seen it here.
Well, I'd be surprised if it's more in the UK because it's everywhere here. Anyway.
So I feel like I've seen it a lot, like lots of just like on packets of anything, it just says extra protein or something.
I've seen a bit of that, but I just say protein. It's not as I haven't seen in Australia.
I'm going to hold.
I feel it's really amped up in the UK.
Can you see this brand? I can't. You can't. It's a bit out of
Siggy's
yogurt. By the way, this is called skyr. It's actually not yogurt. It's cheese that is sold as yogurt. It's actually a kind of cheese. Yeah, they don't put that on the brand, but I think that skyr is actually a very liquidy cheese. And this says
sounds really appetizing. This thing.
Well, the reason I love this, it's got like 5 ingredients. Like, it's very healthy and it's fermented. Obviously, yogurt is fermented versus cheese, but it's fermented, which is very healthy for you. 14 grams of protein. So that is what is written in very big letters, and on the outside, and less sugar, whatever that means. They don't really add sugar to this in any meaningful way. So protein. If you want to sell something, you got gummy bears. I know you're involved in a business that sells candy. Is that right?
I used to be. That business sadly went under. It wasn't my finest investment. Yeah, it went under years ago actually.
I thought it IPO'd.
Candy Club. It did. Then it went under. I had a chance to sell down, so I only got myself to blame for that one.
If only they were around today, they could just go and add protein to their gummies. Totally. And then they could
there were some fundamental problems with that business that protein couldn't have fixed, unfortunately.
All right, we'll leave that. We won't go into too much detail. Yeah. Well, let me tell you one other Australian thing. God, I've got so many. I've got to pick one. Oh, my God. It's hard to know which one to pick. You know, they say a good podcast or a good show is one where you've got heaps of stuff that you didn't get to that was really good. That's how I'm going to feel about this. I'm going to pick this one to have a bit of a contrarian rant about something, okay? How about that? Something in Australia. So, you know the Australia Institute? What can you tell me about the Australia Institute?
Is that the left-leaning institute? That's
like one way of
tank?
saying it. Yeah, the left-wing think tank.
Richard Dennis used to work there? We used to run it, maybe?
I don't have their org chart, so I can't really give you an answer on that. So they're a left-wing, left-leaning, left-whatever think tank that occasionally does some deep thinking, and at other times maybe I would be more critical of their thinking. And so they ran.
We cannot agree with them. There's nothing wrong with left or right-wing think tanks. I
don't think it's not the left-wingedness that is my problem. You know, the thing is this: if you had a bird, and let's say a beautiful eagle, right? And you cut off one of its wings. Doesn't matter if it's left or right, and it tries to fly. Isn't it just going to go in circles? That's not going to be useful. That's how I feel about anything that only looks.
Would it go in circles? Wouldn't it just drop?
I don't know.
I'm no aeronautical engineer, but I reckon one wing wouldn't go in circles. Would just.
Or it would drop or bleed to death would be the probably other way of saying it. And so that's how I feel about anything that's either left wing or right wing. That's why I like hearing all sides of things, right? So, but this is my issue. They ran, so I don't know if you are aware of this. It hasn't been that widely reported. But in order for the despicable Greens, is that a good adjective to use for them?
Appalling,
the Greens Party?
Horrendous.
Yeah. So in order for the despicable Greens to agree to pass horrendous capital gains tax legislation through Parliament. They had to be bribed, is how I describe these things in politics, political bribes. And their particular political bribe was, do you know what it was?
NDIS reform, putting off, assuring that the NDIS can still remain a cesspool of waste, fraud, and corruption, I think is what the Greens demanded.
Yes, you're correct about that political bribe. And so that bribe obviously is going to diminish some of the savings that the government is banking on.
Well, just to clarify, what they've done is they've done a 2-month, instead of passing the legislation, and the Liberals are at fault here as well, because Liberals could have actually passed it, but instead of passing the legislation, they basically agreed with the Greens that they'll put a 2-month review into it. So it just delays. It means the fraud continues. It means the fraudsters in Western Sydney continue to rip off taxpayers and run these criminal enterprises, basically.
Yes.
They're good work, Greens.
And so I've given you a red herring by asking that question, because that would be a great thing for the Australia Institute to complain about how many dollars a day are being wasted by this delay. But that is not how many dollars a day they've complained about. Instead, they've said that the delay in some anti-gambling legislation, or the lack of anti-gambling legislation, is costing Australians $95 million a day in losses. That's the delay that they've decided to target.
Oh, in fairness, that also is a problem. I agree with the Greens on this point.
Let me give you a contrarian view, because I've been thinking a lot about this, because, I've got big issues with gambling companies targeting problem gamblers and sending them broke, and casinos targeting problem gamblers. And there's been lots written about that, and I think it's quite uncontroversial for us to have that particular view. I'm sure we share that view. But I want to talk a little bit about this $95 million a day that Australian gamblers are losing. So I took my daughter to Time Zone in the Gold Coast. You've been to Time Zone? So when you play...
Not that one, but yeah.
Okay, so you know how it works at Time Zone. You play these games and then you get tickets.
Tickets, yeah, of course.
And the tickets...
Absolutely gambling.
And the tickets used to come out as tickets, and now they're just on this card. I thought it was much more fun when they came out as tickets. My daughter incredibly used this claw and yanked out this ring that was like 350 free tickets, on one of their gambling games with the claw thing. And then I had to carry this ring around. So I said, give me the bloody tickets on my card. I got rid of the ring. So I just negated my entire argument. But anyway, so you got this thing. And the thing is this, the reason we don't call this gambling is because the primary reason that you're doing it as a kid or an adult is to have fun with the games, and the stuff that comes out, the tickets and the prizes you get at the end, are just a bonus. And very occasionally you might win a prize worth more than the amount of money you've spent, but you almost never do, right? Mainly it's about having fun with the game. I think there are many people in Australia who use sports betting apps or go into casinos or bet on stuff, especially people that bet with friends. And the main purpose of this is to have fun and to enjoy it. And a secondary purpose might be we're going to try and win money. And that might be most people, or half the people, or a quarter of the people, or 10%. I don't know the answer. I'm not talking about problem gamblers here. But I think to tar an entire industry that people are using as entertainment, with Australians are having $95 million a day in gambling losses stolen off them, I think it's an unfair way to characterise the industry. What do you think about that? You can smash me if you want on that view.
No, I'm not going to smash you. I think it's a reasonable point. I think the challenge is, how do you define a problem gambler, and does sports betting... Obviously, the really bad stuff is pokies. That's the one that kills families. It leads to bang. It's because it's so insidious, and they're programmed to steal money from you. So I think pokies 100% should be banned. That's what the Greens really should be focusing on. That said, I'm much more sympathetic. If all the things the Greens say, this is the least offensive thing they say, like compared to the NDIS.
Well, this was the Australia Institute, not the... I just want to emphasise.
Right,
this is the Australia Institute.
But they were green aligned. Yeah. To that point, you're right about the sports betting thing. You want another form of gambling, which is arguably the most insidious, that my son will kill me if he hears me say this, but Pokemon and football cards is pure gambling.
Oh,
You're trying to get these valuable cards. My son won a $2,000 card a couple of weeks ago. He's addicted to these things now because I got this $2,000 card. Like, it's pure gambling. So
that $2,000 card's crazy that he got a $2,000.
Yeah, and he somehow knew straight away that it was he's got Now it's been sent to the US for grading, ironically, which cost me bloody. So the loser here is me spending $100 for grading. But once it's graded, it becomes worth $2,000. Once it gets its PSA 10 classification.
But I can throw a whole lot of stuff into that. Like, let me throw everything into this basket of gambling to emphasize how hard it is to draw a line. So all of these little plastic balls that you buy, that kids buy in stores, that have got, they used to have shopkins in them, and now they've got other things in them, and you crack them open and they're mystery boxes, basically. So
have they got real value? Can you sell them?
You could sell them, but even if you don't sell them, the fact that you don't know what's in them and you're paying for them, that's a form of gambling.
Yeah, it's less of I think the blind box is less problematic than something that actually has real value, that there's a real tradable liquid market for it. To me, that is a bit more
that's the most extreme version. Then there's the online loot boxes that you pay for, where you absolutely can sell some of the things that you find in those, and it's totally. So my point is this: gambling is now everywhere in some form or other. Lots of it is targeting kids. We just don't call it gambling. I think loot boxes might have actually been banned in Australia for under 18s. Yeah. So my point is this: like, I think we need to think more carefully about what it is that's gambling and not gambling. We definitely don't want people to be addicted to it and to lose their houses. I think that's terrible. And that's historically why I haven't gotten involved in the gambling side of business in the past. Totally. But it's harder to draw a line now than it is in the past. And I do want to emphasize that sometimes the winning or losing money, maybe I'll say sometimes the winning money aspect of it is actually secondary to the primary enjoyment that people are getting from actually engaging in the activity.
Yeah. I think if you look at the spectrum, poker's by far the worst, into kind of table games, into sports betting, into those loot box things, then into kind of cards. I think there is a spectrum there. Yeah. And the question is where we sit. I don't really love any of it, to be honest, but obviously I'm much less sympathetic to pokies, which is just legalized theft, essentially. And the governments are partners with because they get gambling revenue.
And the LMCT plus, like that sits somewhere on the spectrum as well?
Yeah, in the middle, probably. Somewhere in the middle. Yeah. And governments are looking to ban that, trying to ban that, hopefully. Well, who knows?
And crypto casinos? Crypto casinos sit
that's towards pokies.
End of gambling, right?
That's basically pokies.
So Tabcorp, Gil McLaughlin, who I saw one day before that was announced, the investigation by Austrac was announced. He seemed like he was in a pretty good mood when I saw him, maybe not have been the day later.
He's done a pretty good job there.
I think he's done a great job there. But the thing is that he's currently having his arms and legs torn off by Austrac over, not money laundering, let's call it. Okay,
that's what these guys do. That business is that Austrac's business is tearing. Like if Austrac wasn't tearing somebody's hand off, they'd be accused of not doing the job. So he's just his hands are being torn off.
But let me tell you, I've said this before and I'll say it again. 20 years ago, if you wanted to launder money, based on what I've been told by this gambling industry, it was very hard for casinos because that was a great place to launder money. On the roulette table, for example, would be a great place to launder money. But now with these crypto casinos, you can just go run money offshore totally anonymously through these crypto casinos. I mean, like largely most of the money laundering, I think, is migrating to those platforms.
Totally.
And I don't think Stake pretends it's not happening. I think they know that it's happening. So anyway,
and just to clarify, there's two stakes. There's Nat Leiborich's stake, which is essentially a ComSec. They're good. Yep. And there's the other stake, which is owned by Ed Craven, the
crypto casino,
which may or may not be good, but it's just like Matt's stake's very good. So we're not going to obviously just make sure we get the right stake here. Yeah, there's two Australian stakes, both very successful. And I'll move on. You didn't want me to talk about it, but I'm going to give the listeners just a taste of my Uber experience because obviously we love Uber, our friends at Uber. They do an amazing job, but I couldn't not tell you about what happened in the UK on the way to my Barcelona trip. So I had this EasyJet flight, and EasyJet obviously not the most forgiving airline if you're late. So you sort of got to get there on time. Well, I didn't have bags to check in, so I had a bit of runway, but pardon the pun. But I'm in where I am now, as you can tell by the alpacas in the background, is rural UK. So I'm about 45 minutes from Luton Airport, but in the middle of nowhere. So I can't just go and hail a cab. So I had to reserve an Uber. Do you reserve Ubers in Melbourne? Well, you got a guy, don't you?
What do you mean reserve for going where? I mean, I don't know.
Like to the, you can. Guy, but I've got I've got a. When I
I've got a
go to the
guy,
airport
so you
at
better
6
watch
a.m.
what you say about me because, you know.
When I go to the airport at 6 a.m, I'll reserve the Uber the night
I
before
see,
to make sure.
I
So I'm not booking in the morning in case there's a delay. And Uber
No,
in
I
Australia
haven't found that very reliable in the past.
I've had an
I've tried.
amazing experience in Australia with this. I've probably done it 20 times and it's worked 20 times, or maybe worked 19 times. And they don't really differentiate the price. So it might be like $1 more, but roughly it's $65. But it's a really good service. I think it's really great. In the UK, there's two issues. One, they charge about a 50% premium, which I kind of understand. I'm paying for security. They've got to get some guy out to my house in 20 minutes.
A
from anywhere.
50% premium for which bit of it?
For the fact that I'm going to book it the night before rather than get it on the morning of.
A 50% premium?
In fact, exactly. It was exactly a 50% premium. So instead of being 33 quid, it was 50 quid.
God, you get worked up about strange things. Like you get worked up if something comes and it's at like the food's at like 72 degrees instead of 80 degrees, but someone charging you 50% more because you booked it. You're pretty relaxed about that. I'm shocked about that.
But as to your point, I'm paying for a service. The services I'm getting, inverted commas, guaranteed pickup. Because otherwise it can take 15, 20 minutes to come, and that my time's got value. So
all right, I can guess where this story is going, but even if it would have turned up, which I suspect is where this story might be going.
Oh, you're sort of right here. You're not fully right. You're not fully right.
Premium, even if it turns up on time, I find that excessive. But I'm happy that you're prepared to pay it. You are the target customer.
Uber's saying what's the market willing to pay? I was willing to pay this. Clearly, other people are willing to pay this. I've got. Like the market's the market, and as you of all people know this. So if Uber can get away charging 50%, and more importantly, give the drivers a lot of that premium, I actually don't have a huge issue with it. What I do have an issue with is what happened next. So driver was actually rated 5.00, so perfect rating on Uber, which is always a bit suspicious, but big rating, lots of ratings. Anyway, I got a message. So I had a 4:30 a.m. departure, so pretty early, and I was cutting it fine, but I was getting there about 2 hours before an international flight. So I was going to be fine, but it wasn't masses and masses of time. So I book it at 4:20. I get a message. It's on the way. At 4:25, I'm still just getting ready. I said, I'm running about, I'll be there at 4:29. He was going to be there a little bit early. Park next to the white car out the front. It's down this sort of weird laneway, in typical English country lane. Anyway, send the message. He didn't reply. 4:29 rolls past. I start walking out. I don't see him there. I look at the Uber map, and he's sort of, the way this sort of laneway works is the laneway forks, and it's this lane the way that goes, it's effectively a long dead end. So I start walking up the laneway to where I thought the car was on the map, and I get up, and he's sort of parked in someone's residence behind a gate, which doesn't make, basically the car was hidden somewhere, which is really weird. So I couldn't get to him. I'm messaging him, he's not replying, I'm calling him, he's not replying.
It was deliberately hidden, or?
Well, you'll find out in a second. I'm messaging him, I'm calling him, no response. 4:29, 4:31, 4:32, 4:30. After a certain period of time, they can then cancel because they said, "Oh, you haven't rocked up." So I'm desperately trying to reach it. It's very hard to get another Uber. I paid this huge premium to reserve it. I've got to get to this EasyJet flight. The guy's not replying to me. I'm then sort of waiting. The guy basically has to. It's a one-way road, so I'm waiting there. He cancels on me, drives right past me, like literally, and I'm like my hands are in the air, standing. Basically, he always hit me. Drives right past me, speeds off in his Tesla. The only thing I can think of is this guy purposely hid the car, waited to the time to expire, got paid the full fare, which is this massive premium fare, and just went off and did another job. Like there's no other explanation for it. I was ringing him, I was waving him down, and then I quickly requested another one. He obviously ignored that request. The story gets even worse. So remember, the original fare was 33 quid. I went back to that 33 quid, starts looking for an Uber. You know how it goes, that looking, nothing, 10 minutes, nothing happens. I'm like, oh, bloody hell. I'm like, my plane's about to leave here. And then says, okay, you can do this express. We'll give you we'll do like a better search. £67. It's now doubled. So it went from 33 to 51 to 67. Eventually one comes on the 67. So I've now paid $140 or $150 to go a 35-minute journey. Almost missed my plane because this Uber driver has literally stolen from me. And there's no way I can job on this Uber guy because he cancelled. The whole thing evaporates. So there's basically this legalized fraud going on here where these Ubers are hiding, waiting for time to expire and completely shafting customers who are then missing planes at 4 a.m. in the morning.
Well, it's interesting. I'm just going to say this for 15 seconds because I do not want to encourage your Uber stories. But I had a weird experience on the Gold Coast where I didn't book it, but I had a situation where a guy turned up and on the map he was right in front of me. And I couldn't see him for the life of me, and he didn't respond to my messages, and then he cancelled. I suspect that was more, though, because I wanted to go north, and he's probably at the end of the day, and he wanted to go south, go home at the end of the day. But there is something a bit weird going on with that map. So I'm with you on that. I'll tell you this 30-second bit of advice for people in Australia. Remember that country? So when you're over in your warm 85-degree UK heat, I'm talking Celsius. This is what I do now. You tell me if you ever do this, Mike. So I've got Uber One or whatever that Uber thing I pay for is, and I got a free DoorDash version of it because I'm an Amazon Prime member. Yeah. And now when I booked Turkish food yesterday, I go and order it on Uber Eats. I go and order it on DoorDash. I see who's got the cheapest price. Usually it's pretty similar. But actually, DoorDash was $10 cheaper on like a $70, $80 order yesterday. So I wonder if that was an anomaly.
How much cheaper, sorry?
$10 on a $70 or $80 order.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I wonder if that, and I always click the priority thing for an extra $3 or $4. I never used to, but then on a Saturday night, they've often got 9 orders to drop off before they get to me. Exactly. And so it's completely cold. It's worth the $4, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But I wonder if this is the beginning of a trend in some price competition between the major platforms, or if it's just an anomaly. But you'll be excited to know. I'll keep you posted.
Can we move on?
World Cups I am totally in favour of moving on.
The World Cup's in massive at the moment, up to a semi-final stage. So we're obviously recording this over the weekend. Just had the last of the two big quarters. So Argentina are through. So Lionel Messi, Argentina's through. They'll be playing England. So obviously I'm in England, so it was a pretty big deal here. So we actually live just across the road from a pub, so that was going absolutely off last night. So hence didn't get to sleep till quite late, but.
What time was the game English time?
Started 10 p.m. So you couldn't get a better time for pubs to start the game. It was roaring.
Were you watching it in the English countryside or in London?
In the countryside.
And what time do pubs usually close in the countryside?
You'd be shocked to know I'm not a massive pub guy. I assume they shut around 11, 12 maybe.
So this is good news. And they got permission to stay open late, I think, when there's a World Cup game.
It started quieting down around midnight. It started quieting down. So I presume that's about the time they usually shut.
But this would have been, it's great news for pubs, right? Like every time
you couldn't get it. You couldn't get it. It's a fairy tale for pubs. Because remember, people, a 10 p.m. game means people get there at 4 p.m., 5 p.m. and they're there for 7 hours. So it's unbelievable. And the game went all the way through. It went to extra time. So you couldn't have got GDP just rocket. But I reckon that, to me, who do you reckon the star of this World Cup has been? The breakout star. You're a big soccer guy.
The breakout star. Well, I thought Haaland would have been the breakout star.
Yeah, Haaland. Haaland.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's actually his first World Cup. I thought he went to the last one, but I thought he wasn't at Qatar. He goes to 23. But I'm not sure you saw the Wall Street Journal had a great profile on the Manchester City beast.
Oh, I did see that. Yeah.
It was a little bit about Haaland, but really it was about Norway. And we know Norway is really kind of in many ways a socialist country that has these elements of capitalism about it. And this is sort of typifies this. But
a country with the luxury of using this kind of neo-socialist Scandinavian model,
rich,
because it goes and finds North Sea gas that funds the entire country to the point where they have to force people to retire at a certain age, or else, like, they just want to keep the jobs available for people. And to their credit, so not to their credit, they talk a lot about climate change whilst making all of their money from North Sea gas exports.
97% electric cars.
Yes, but to their credit, on two very consequential decisions they made. Decision one, they sure know how to tax resource companies in Norway.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they have a very good model for doing that. And number two, they made a rule, which is their mega sovereign wealth fund is not allowed to invest any of its money in Norway. And to not bubble up the economy, but as a consequence of that, they own something like 1.5% to 2% on average of world stock markets. So
anyway, I think it's the biggest sovereign wealth in the world, right?
There are many things I love about Norway. including the fact that they're great catapult customers, their teams.
Yeah.
But there are also some things I don't love about Norway, obviously.
Yeah, I'm the same. Yeah.
Political climate, but they have done their economics exceptionally well in that country, in my view.
I think they've done a lot of things very well. And the other thing I really love, and this is the sort of one thing I do love about socialism, is they've got a really low-cost, high-participation system of youth sports, which is the opposite to the US, really. And this is what the journal said. It was basically said that it was always that everybody should play equally, everybody should have fun, and winning matches at a young age is not important. And obviously, I'm a pretty competitive guy, as you know, but this is one thing I really agree with. And a sports scientist named Martin Erikstad, could you get a more Norwegian name, heard a place that was nurturing talent while keeping everyone happy, and went to Bern, which is where Haaland grew up. Haaland's dad, of course, played for Man City. So Haaland could have actually played for England, ironically. But he went back to Norway, grew up in this sort of really egalitarian place. So in Norway, participation matters more than trophies. Norwegians are famously born wearing skis and skates, but 2/3 of the country's boys are still wearing soccer boots when they're 11 years old. The nation is so committed to egalitarian ideals of social enjoyment, proper development, and sport for all. The kids aren't even sorted by talent until they're 13. By then, most precocious Americans are already burning out. Only after Norwegians have sampled a bunch of different sports, they specialise in one. Haaland, for example, grew up cross-country skiing and playing handball while destroying records in what might have been his best sport of all, the long jump. I absolutely love this. I've been around, obviously, kids' sports. I played kids' sports like you did for a long time, and so my kids both play kids' sports at varying levels. So they're really great at some sports and not great at other sports, as most kids are. But what I notice a lot about team sports in Australia, and I think this is probably the case in most sort of Western democracies, is there's this, Malcolm Gladwell talks about this a little bit in Outliers, where the 10,000 hour thing, where in many countries, like almost every professional sports person is effectively old for their year, because they sort kids so early that the kids who are developed 6 months earlier get put in these priority streams to become better. So there's that element. But even if you go to a sort of less high level, just sort of regular sports, footy clubs, cricket clubs, whatever, especially footy and soccer and basketball, sort of team sports, is you get coaches who are often dads or mums, but usually dads, who are okay sports people themselves and very rarely elite. I think elite people don't have this problem, but the non-elite coaches, and their kids are usually pretty good, and they seem to be, and they almost always will give the better kids a massive run, and the lesser kids are usually the smaller young kids, no run at all. And that means the team might win a few more games, depends on the makeup, but it means certain kids, and if your kids just develops more slowly, they basically never go run and never amount to anything. But the way that sort of these coaches are motivated is I think they need to win every game at every cost, which is exactly the opposite of what Norway does, the non-keeping score thing, and it results in a worse overall system. And it's not real capitalism, because it's effectively an autocracy. And I hate coaches that don't give even time. It's different when you're under 16s, under 15s level, whatever. That's very different, or a rep team. But in non-rep teams that are effectively playing for fun, coaches who don't give even time, I absolutely hate. And to me, it's just terrible coaching.
Well, the US is the most extreme version of that, which obviously I see a lot of this through Catapult. You know, the amount of pressure on young kids in the US with things called travel teams and the like is it's pretty dramatic. I'll give you an example of another country, because I generally agree exactly with what you're saying. I'll give you an example of another country that there was a leadership lesson that happened this week in another sporting event that in any regular year would be the number one sporting event being reported right now. But because the World Cup is on, it's been slightly overlooked. Do you know what event
Wimbledon?
has just been going on? Yes, Wimbledon. And so there was an incredible, I don't know if I'd call it a leadership lesson or probably a personal high performance lesson that came out of Wimbledon this week. And that was the victory of Linda Noskova, a Czech player. Her opponent was also from the Czech Republic, and I'm going to touch on that in a second in terms of like the lesson that you've just given here is a lesson for Australia. I'm going to reinforce it. But Linda Noskova, she won, but first she lost. I mean, it's her first Grand Slam. Grand Slam victory. She's very young. She lost 5 set points, and then she did something very unexpected. Do you know what she did, Mike? After she lost 5
set points through the tournament, you mean?
No, in this final, she lost, she gave up 5 set points, I should say.
Oh,
so she had
her own. Sorry, I thought she lost. Gotcha.
Yeah, to win the match.
Yeah.
So I really said this very badly. She gave it 5 match points.
Yeah.
And
5
and
tournament
then she did
points.
something
She had 5 tournament
unexpected.
points.
That's right.
I didn't
You know
see
what-
this. No.
Yes. Do you know what she did, Adam?
She won?
She eventually won, but first she did something that was very surprising. She cried.
Oh.
She was on the court. She lost these 5 chances to win, and then she cried. And everyone looked at her and thought, well, that's the end of her. Like, she's going to fall to pieces. And then she pulls herself back together and she goes on to win in 3 sets. And if that is not a lesson in human high-performance resilience, then I don't know what is. It's remarkable. The only thing I would want to talk to her about, if I could speak to her after that win, would be on what happened in that moment. And like, was that controlled? Was it uncontrolled? Did she have to pull herself back together? Or was it like a psychological strategy to keep going? I thought it was one of the most remarkable pieces of human performance I've seen in a very, very long time. But the thing you should also know about the Czech Republic, the women are very, very good at tennis. They have won Wimbledon 5 out of the last probably
it's an
13
amazing tennis
times.
country, the Czech Republic. And there was also some good male tennis players as well, not quite to the extent of the females.
Okay, that's a good point. So the women are amazing. It's a country of 10 million people.
Yeah, it's
massively
amazing country.
Massively outperforms Australia on tennis, but especially
not just tennis though. I think they're good at a lot of sports, to be honest.
Well, the women are unbelievable at competitive tennis. Much better, relatively speaking, than the men. Why do you think there is the gender difference? There's a reason for this.
Absolutely no idea.
You know, Mike?
No.
So it has nothing to do with gender, and it is actually an incredible sociological experiment, which is that men tend to gravitate to the 2 biggest sports in the Czech Republic, which are football.
Soccer? Yeah.
Soccer. And ice hockey.
Handball, maybe?
Ice
hockey, yeah.
And so that's what sucks all of the men across, or many of the men. Whereas for women, this is the number 1 sport in the Czech Republic. And so what you see is the outcome cost of focus versus a more diffuse talent pathway into other sports.
Can I just make the argument, though, that wouldn't that be the case with, like, the UK, for example? Obviously, females do play soccer as well, but like soccer football was a massive sport for men in every European country. Yet there's other European countries where the women aren't as dominant in tennis. I'm not sure that fully.
No. So there's a reason why the women are dominant in tennis, and the reason should also be the same for men in the Czech Republic. And the reason is, I thought it might be a bit boring for you, but basically, when the communists were hanging around, they created these great tennis academies, tons of tennis courts. It's super easy and cheap to get onto a tennis court. They were really good, and then they go back into the system, like you just said about Norway and soccer. They go back into the system and train young kids and have the same kind of attitude towards soccer as Norway has to tennis, as Norway has to soccer, of like nurturing these kids, and they end up to be really, really good. And that is peculiar to the Czech Republic, and it makes them really good. But the reason the women are so much better than the men in the Czech Republic is because of the alternate pathways that men have for sporting success, whereas women are very focused on this. The bottom line is, I think if you take what you just said about Norway and what you said about the Czech Republic, there are some lessons for Australia in how we can go and create great elite athletes again in some of these sports, because we've kind of waned in Australia, to be honest, in the last decade.
Some sports. I think some sorts of it. But going back to my original point, one thing I do notice is when you've got a really elite coach, as in there was a guy called Tim Clark who coached another team when I was briefly coaching at footy, and Tim was a great footballer himself. I didn't quite play AFL, but wasn't far off, and his kids are incredible sports people, could be AFL players, and he was really good at giving everyone a very equal go, despite having an incredibly talented team, and that team performed really well over 4 or 5 years. So interestingly, it's the long-term view, which is giving people an equal go and building them up over a longer period, leads to a better result for the entire team. But you don't have that. Maybe you don't have as much short-term success in year 1 and 2, but year 3, 4, 5. And that's why I think when you've got elite coaches, they generally realize this. It's the parents who have a talented but not elite kid who tend to and all they have is the kid being okay at this whatever sport. They tend to want to, and maybe this is subconsciously biased. I don't think they mean to do it. I think they do it unintentionally, create this sort of caste system within the team, and I think it's by far the wrong result. And Norway and Haaland is a perfect example of what happens when you don't do that. The greatest soccer player in the world came through an egalitarian regime.
And also you get the advantage of a 50-foot Viking who can like move a mountain like before lunch. So, there are some biological advantages there as well.
There's a story I just couldn't resist this week. I think you know what I'm going to talk about, and it warmed the cockles of my heart. Economic Papers journal released a study that found Australians who work from home do less exercise, eat more food, and are at greater risk of becoming obese. This, of course, comes as the disastrous Jacinta Allen, Dan Andrews government prepares to force Victorian businesses to make staff work from home 2 days a week in a last-ditch vote-buying effort for her viscerally hated administration. RMIT University academic Apoku Adir found that adding just 1 hour of working from home increased the body mass index and significantly boosted the likelihood of being obese from 7.5 to 9.1 percentage point, which is pretty incredible. Adir found that main channels through which working from home led to weight gain was increased frequency of snacking on Twinkies, probably, reduced physical activity. The structured office environment also imposed norms around meal times that did not exist at home, while workplace smoking bans discouraged cigarette use. The research used 16 years of data from household income and covered 22,000 individuals. This comes just weeks after work from home fan Canva directed new hires work from its lavish Sydney office. And of course, probably the biggest proponent of work from home globally, Atlassian has lost 80% of its market value since allowing staff to work from anywhere. Adir, we saw COVID really created this work from home epidemic, ironically, and what obviously COVID killed was obese people. Are we seeing the greatest anachronism of all time here with work from home leading to obesity?
Well, I'll just give you two quick rebuttals and then agree with you. One is I think Atlassian losing 80% of its value and being a work from home advocate might be called correlation is not causation. And the second thing I'd say is it wasn't just obese people that died in COVID. There were a lot of obese people that died in COVID, but there were also a lot of people that were not obese that died in COVID. So, but let me agree with you and say even more than agreeing with you on this work from home thing, it's very relatable for me because when I'm working from home, there is no doubt that I spend a lot more time in the kitchen hunting down snacks. And when I'm out and meeting people, even in a cafe, which is full of snacks, I don't eat the snacks.
Yeah,
and when I'm at work, I don't eat the snacks. And I don't smoke, but I can easily imagine that if you're at work, like if you wouldn't be smoking there because you can't smoke. And at home, you can have your vape or whatever it is that you do. Yeah, it's all, like the thing is this. There are some really complex problems that exist in the world, and they're really hard to figure out. You need like lots of maths and detailed models. This isn't one of them. This is all super obvious. Like, of course.
Well, I think it's obvious. It's obvious to us, but I don't think it's obvious to people who are massive fans of working from home. I think there's always upside and no downside.
It's still obvious. It's obvious as they're stuffing their faces, as I am. Like, it's obvious to all of us. It's just, do you want to accept the reality? Now, there are things that I do that I shouldn't be doing, and you would go and do your like little speech about this, and this happens and that happens, and it would be obvious to me as well. I just wouldn't want to accept it, so I just engage in A-grade cognitive dissonance, and I would find a way to pretend that it wasn't happening so I could keep doing the thing I don't want to do. Like, I like to eat snacks, and so I cut back on snacks. And I know when I eat processed sweet things, it's going to be not good for my pancreas and it might increase my risk of diabetes. And I've got familial type 2 diabetes. I can tell you all the cognitive dissonance ways that I make myself feel okay when I go and get the ice cream. I've got 100 of them. Like, I know how to do it. And so people that want to work from home, they got their tricks as well. It's not like they don't see this. Of course they must see this.
I think another big reason is offices are a lot bigger than houses. So if I want to go and speak to Mike on the other side of the office, I've got to walk around 50, 60, 100 meters constantly through the days. There's a bunch of that incidental exercise. The other one is getting to work almost always involves at least a kilometre of walking. Even if you drive, you've still got to park in a car park and get up. So
most people don't have car spots. Most people are catching public transport
100%.
to work.
But even if you do have a car spot, public transport, you've got to walk to the train station, along the platform. Like, I'll generally I'll obviously try and walk to work as well, because I'm lucky enough to be sort of 15-minute walk to work. But there's probably an extra half an hour to an hour of exercise simply by getting to and from work for most people. So there's so many benefits of going to the office. You get promoted, you get pay rises, and you lose weight. It's just why anyone wants to work from home, other than the people who really have to for obviously caring reasons, but that's a small proportion. A lot of people who work from home who don't have to, who still insist on working from home against their own interests so massively, is completely bizarre to me.
On all of your points, look, I feel the same way about work from home in a sense as I feel about the AI revolution. What I mean by that is there's been this dramatic change, and it's very hard to know how it ends. It's easier with work from home to know how it ends than AI. But I don't think it ends going back to what everyone was doing in like 2015. Like, I don't think that's how work from home plays out. I also don't think it plays out like what was going on in 2021 or even 2022. I think that the balance of where people work shifts. It's not exactly clear precisely where it's going to land, but I think it's becoming clearer. And in bad news for you, I don't think where it lands is, I mean, it might not be bad news for you, by the way, I'm being a bit facetious. I don't think it lands with 5 days of full-time work in the office. It would surprise me if that became the standard in 5 years' time.
That's the opposite of bad news for me. I love the fact that our competitors aren't 5 days in the office. That's a competitive advantage we have. So by all means, if you're competing against us in the travel space, we don't pay too much attention to competitors, to be honest, but if you're competing against Luxury Escapes, work 0 days a week. I would love that, because it means it's a huge advantage for us. It means our customers are being served better. It means our team are working more collaboratively. What I do care about is public servants spending our money not working 5 days a week, but any private enterprise can do whatever they want. Like managers, bosses, CEOs, choose what you want to do. I don't care, but public employees should be at the office.
Why aren't you worried that you will get a reduced set of employees you can choose from by not, I'm going to talk 5 years in the future, not today. So let's say 5 years in the future, there's some element of flexibility that comes into things in terms of being in the office 5 days a week. And you say, that's not our philosophy at Luxury Escapes. You see how I gave the very gentle version of what you might say? And so
what we say.
And so do you not worry that constrains your set of potential employees?
That maybe if we lived in a town that has 200 people, it would constrain us. We have offices in Melbourne, Sydney that have 5 million people. We don't need to have a subset of 5 million people. So there's that. But there's also, I understand people's scenarios change. Sometimes we hire people and they then have 4 kids. So in that case, their scenarios change legitimately. So we'll be much more understanding. So it really depends on the circumstance. We don't have 100% of people working 5 days a week, by the way. We have probably 80% of people working 5 days a week. And that 20% who have a real requirement for flexibility get that flexibility they need. What we want is people who can work from the office, working from the office, which is a big difference. Our team's the best it's ever been by a long way. So, and our turnover is less of people coming to the office. So our own data has been that it's been incredibly beneficial for team quality. If anything, we had too many people at one point. There wasn't enough churn. So we seem to be having the other issue. That's not to say things don't change, but I think what we're finding is people are realizing, and especially, remember, the people who want to work in the office are younger people who don't tend to be older people, and they're people who are transitioning out of the workforce. So if people need flexibility, we give it to them. If they don't need it, we won't give it to them. It's a pretty simple policy, and we don't really have any issues there. There are people who really, for health reasons or for caring reasons, need it. That's completely fine. We've never shied away from that. But if you're a 25-year-old tech bro who wants to eat Twinkies at home, go work somewhere else. Like that's not our 25-year-old no kids, I should say. We very much look at case by case. We don't have broad policies like Atlassian does. And to be honest, again, if you look at our performance versus Atlassian's performance, Atlassian's a much bigger company with incredible competitive advantages. If you look at our last 5 years since we had these different policies, I think our performance has been far better than theirs. And I think if they had the time again, maybe they would have chosen a different policy.
Well, I think the good news for you is that a 25-year-old, not only are they unlikely to have kids, but they probably still live with their parents. I think they're pretty keen to get out of that house and get to work. So probably. I think that's a good tailwind that's playing in your favour.
Let's move on. AI billionaire factory and media machine Thermos was back in the headlines last week. Reports it's about to raise 2.9 billion in fresh equity at a headline valuation of 15.5 billion, which is unbelievable. We should actually take this with a big grain of salt, given it's preference shares, not common equity. And you've warned really well to our listeners that a preference.
Well, I was going to just, I'm going to just reiterate what this means, which it means if I put in, how many billions am I putting in? 2 point what?
2.9.
2.9. So if I put 2.9 billion into this business and I have a preference share, we'll keep it a simple preference share. We'll call it a 1 times non-participating preference share. By the way, that's a simple preference share. This is finance. It's so complicated. There's all these words. So 1 times, that means it only applies to the amount of money that I put in, not more. So I can't go up. Well, not 1 times means I can get my money back at the end if I want to. Non-participating means I have to choose between getting my money back and getting the value of my equity. I can't participate in the equity after getting my money back. And so if I put 2.9 billion and it sells for $2.9 billion by the receivers in 3 years' time, then I would get the whole $2.9 billion, assuming no one else had preference shares, which I'm sure they do. So I would get the whole $2.9 billion and nobody else would get anything because I would trigger my preference share. But if the business went to $100 billion, then my 20% of the company for my 2.9 billion, not a bit less, but my 20% of the company, that would be worth $20 billion. And so I would say, I'm not going to go and trigger my preference share and get my 2.9 billion back. I'll get my 20% equity and get my $20 billion. So that is what it means. And the reason that you just said that it has an effect on valuation and the valuation's a bit pretend is because of this. Whether the valuation is 20 bill or 30 bill, I still have this 1 times preference. And so if I look at this business and I say, I'm betting it's going to be either 200 bill or it's going to explode. But I think even if it explodes, I'm probably going to get my $2.9 billion back. Then if I have to pay $29 billion valuation to get in versus a $21 billion valuation, but my thesis is it's going to 200, that's a worthwhile bet because my downside is still protected in exactly the same way. So it just gives you more flexibility to pay a bigger headline valuation if you believe that you're betting on a mega outcome and that if it fails, you'll still have the same likelihood of getting your money back. So that's why preference shares distort valuation.
And they may well have dividends attached. So it's not debt-like, but it's more debt-like than common equity, essentially. Just call it further down the stack.
Well, a good preference share, if you're on the buy side, an even better preference share, is one that says you have to pay some returns, a minimum guaranteed return, or 1.5 times, so 1.5 times liquidation preference. So I put my $2.9 billion in and I get 1.5 times that back, not just 1 times, or a participating preference. That's nasty. That means I get my money back and it means I get my equity as well, or a ratchet, which means if certain things don't happen, the value of my shares I get an increasing number of shares. There's a million different ways. Maybe this is my overarching comment. I had this exact conversation with someone maybe 3 days ago. The greatest asset for a institutional investor like a venture capitalist, the greatest asset is a founder who is fixated on valuation, on headline valuation. Because when it's like a magic trick, if I can get you to look over here and just focus on the headline valuation, then with a sleight of hand, I can do all of these other sneaky things like put in vetoes and ratchets and all sorts of other stuff. So don't fall for them. And most VCs are not nasty like that, but don't fall for the magician's tricks. Don't just watch the hand with the headline valuation. Look at the whole package that you're being offered by the investor.
And part of the reason that founders, executives want this higher sort of headline valuation is so that if Thermos, for example, wants to list in a couple of years, they want to list at a higher valuation again. So this sets, and we know it's a fake floor, but it sets some sort of floor. It doesn't always work. We saw what happened with SoftBank and WeWork, but this is kind of a fake floor being set at this 15.5. We know this is not a real valuation, and any smart investor knows it's not a real valuation, but some people will think it's a real valuation. So the funds itself won't be used for the recently announced Indonesian data center.
Let me just disagree with something that you've said there, okay? You've given a very sophisticated view of why the headline valuation is so important. But like Sigmund Freud, he would have a different view of why the headline valuation is important. I'm not going to do his German accent. He would say it's all about ego. That's what he would say. And the Skyhooks, you know who they were? I don't know. That's before my time. They sang a song called "Ego is not a dirty word." You know
Shirley
that
Strawn.
song? Yeah, "Ego is not a dirty word." That's
Red
their
Simons.
song. And so that should be "Ego is not a dirty word" by the Skyhooks. Should be the theme song of the startup industry, because all of these headline valuations largely are there to drive the egos of the founders. And that is the gift that I'm talking about, that founders give to VCs, because VCs, what they care about is making money. And so if you want your ego to run rampant and chase a high headline valuation, they are more than happy to facilitate your ego if it increases their chances of making money.
Absolutely. And the funds won't be used for the recently announced Indonesian data centre, but rather pitched as the final piece of funding for its Tasmanian data centres and early works in South Australia. Bear in mind, Firmus recently raised at $8 billion, which itself was a massive increase. But not everybody's falling for the hype. John Pearce, the well-respected CEO of UniSuper, which manages $150 billion in retirement savings, didn't expect there would be public float of Firmus soon, making a rare public expression of scepticism about the company's plans. Pearce even claimed they didn't think Firmus's non-deal roadshow was well received in Australia. Paul Smith, who heads up the AFR's tech section, which is a great section, was also critical in the AFR, noting that while most investors don't want to bet against Nvidia's chief executive Jensen Huang, the circular nature of the AI trade, when Nvidia funds all of its customers who then use that cash to buy more Nvidia gear, is a massive stitch-up. Apart from its currently unproven cooling technologies inside its unbuilt data centers, Firmus facilities will be chockers with expensive Nvidia gear, which depreciates faster than a sports car. Any downturn in demand or the currently unlikely emergence of better rival risks leaving them horridly flapping in the breeze. The $15.5 billion number is to be believed. Ollie Curtis will have a net worth of $2 billion and his co-founder Tim Rosenfeld $725 million. This is obviously some pretty big stuff, Adir. What do you think of the whole Nvidia circular Ponzi scheme circle jerk?
Well, it's hard to support it now that you've phrased it like that. But the good news is I wasn't likely to support it anyway. I will say about this, if I'm wrong about neoclouds, I will be so wrong, and I'm happy to do a mea culpa of how badly I got the whole thing wrong. But the way
just to clarify, Firmus isn't a neocloud. CoreWeave's a neocloud. Firmus is a data center operator. So obviously, as you said
but
before,
predominantly it's signing deals with a hyperscaler assumed to be Meta.
Yeah, who's actually selling off its capacity, ironically.
Who's selling off its capacity, but you say they're not a neocloud. But why do you say they're not a neocloud? They are a neocloud. They're a data center operator that is making capacity available for hyperscalers to use in order to run their machines, their models.
Correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding of neoclouds are people who almost rent capacity in data centers and then sublease those capacities onto the hyperscalers.
That's one version of a neocloud. But ideally, every neocloud wants to build their own data centers, because that is going to try to turn, the old Netflix trick of turning a variable cost into a fixed cost, and then it declines as a variable cost. So if I have to pay for every bit of data center I use, and the more revenue I pay, my cost just the scale with my revenue. That sucks. And so if I buy a data center, there's a big upfront cost, but eventually, if I'm really successful, that cost will be much smaller than I would have actually spent paying this scaled cost if I rented the space. So I don't believe in any of this. I think AI, I read somewhere that someone said AI is like electricity. That's how big the transformation is for society. I think the jury's still out on that, but I think it's possible. It's not impossible. I don't think it's likely, but I think it might be a change that is not that different. And I think it might be on the level of the internet, which, by the way, is still a pretty dramatic change. Like, the internet's not as big as electricity, but we don't have to argue about whether it was big or small. It was dramatic. I think AI is going to be like that. But I think that the economics that are powering the AI industry today are farcical. The reason I say I'm going to be so wrong is it's so obvious to me that this is ridiculous. And so if I'm wrong, that means I just had this huge blind spot and everyone else saw this thing that I just couldn't see, which is certainly possible, but it will be a huge mistake by me if that's the case. And when I look at any of these players, Iron, Firmus, whatever you want to call them, and I look at the way what you just described as the economics, it feels to me like there's this house of cards that's being built with a really good core. That's Nvidia. But it's got this great core, and it's building this house of cards around it. And its house of cards is that 2/3 of its revenue are coming from like 3 or 4 customers. That's its house of cards. And also that all of its clients are now so angry about the mega margins that they're making, they're trying to build their own competing chips. So, you know, and Jensen Huang, in fact, I'm going to tell you at the end of this ramble what I think what might be the high point of the bubble in a second. But like ring the bell moment, okay? But so you got this great core, it's a great business, Nvidia. It's got this house of cards built around it. And then what happens is on top of that house of cards, they start building these other house of cards all over the world. And I think Firmus isn't one, and they've got no good core. They're just a house of cards balanced on the house of cards bit of Nvidia. And when the house of cards collapses, they all collapse down. Nvidia's house of cards part of their business collapses as well. I think that's what's going on here with the circular funding and the underestimation of depreciation schedules, which I think will hurt hyperscalers and their depreciation and having to expense all this stuff earlier than expected more than neoclouds, because neoclouds have got bigger problems. The fundamental economics of neoclouds don't work, in my view. And so I think the capacity being built out is too much. None of this seems real to me. And I'll tell you what I think is, like, you want to ring the bell of the bubble? I tell you what just happened. This is my son sent this to me. It's very amazing. So do you know that over the weekend, or end of last week, Nvidia just simultaneously released 14 new cards? Do you know that?
No, I didn't know this.
Well, these are not the cards that you think they are. These are trading cards with a chip on every single card, plus some amazing games that made up the history of Nvidia, plus one card that just lets you see how many of the other cards you've got. And these cards are going to be available live, and you can go and get them if you go to events. You don't get them if you buy the products. And my guess is, so one of the cards I think is like, it's the 10 series, GTX 10 series, which is like was the first like big step up in graphics cards. And my guess is that a lot of these cards, if they're in short supply, will trade on eBay and other platforms for more money than the underlying card that they represent. These trading cards. This is the high point of the bubble. Nvidia is running trading cards of its chips that people are going to be so desperate to get their hands on. I know it's a ramble, but I just cannot believe what's going on here. It's mind-blowing.
Well, you've been right. I think we both 100% agree here. Like, and your comparison really early on was this is like the aircraft industry or the airline industry. Airlines are incredible. Like, they have been one of the most transformative technologies in the last 100 years. As Warren Buffett says, a far-sighted capitalist would have shot down the Wright brothers a Kitty Hawk because it's been a disaster. It's been a money furnace for investors, although they've looked like they've actually finally got it right, ironically. But that's really got the back of credit cards and become financial services businesses. But for 100 years, airlines burned cash nonstop. Reason being there was no competitive advantages, and that they were effectively selling a commoditized product, i.e. travel from point A to point B. And there was no reason why a Qantas plane versus a LATAM plane versus a Lufthansa plane versus a BA plane. There was actually very little difference between them. They all sort of took you from point A to point B. And in many respects, you look at the, well, I hate the name hyperscalers because none of these scalers really scale that hyperly for a start. They're just like kind of really.
They should be called hyperspenders, not hyperscalers.
Yeah, 100%.
Hyperspenders.
Hyper off-balance sheet spenders is what they should be called.
Not off-balance sheet, on-balance sheet. Off income statement spenders.
Off P&L spenders, yeah, exactly. So they'll hide the spend, and but Nvidia will book the spend, but we've talked about that at length. But I think the biggest problem is if you look at all the way down the stack, no one has competitive, except for Nvidia, and that's been ground away. Nvidia's got incredible competitive advantages. Like, we think they're overpriced, but incredible competitive advantages. They've got incredible quantum resource in CUDA. They've got massive scale. They've got huge brand. They've got all that stuff, albeit Trainium's starting to chip away at it slowly and Intel's chipping away. But they've got some pretty big competitive advantages. No one else does, though. Like, look at the price drops that OpenAI are doing. That proves there's no competitive advantage. The fact that you drop, what does competitive advantage give you? Pricing power. What does the AI frontier models not have? Pricing power now. Oh, sorry. Anthropic temporarily has it, but it's about to lose it because people are just leaving in droves.
They're all going to lose it.
And people are going to deep seek. So the whole thing, this effectively, I think, and we both get benefit from AI running businesses. There's lots of
percentage of your day are you spending on AI? I would say I'm spending
personally?
3 to 4 hours a day I'm spending.
Oh, nothing like that. Way low. When I use it, so I use it for my board packs, for example, and so I use Notebook because it's got Nano Banana, which produces incredible content, although it does the most ridiculous hallucinations and it just doesn't fix it sometimes. So like it will take the wrong data and I'll say, fix this data. It'll stuff it up again. I'll say, fix it. It'll stuff it again. I'll literally type the data in each day. It'll still stuff it up. I'll then have to just delete the slide. Like,
do you want me to tell you, I'll give you a solution to your problems that will help you with hallucinations. So these models are it turns out that the hallucinations happen most when the amount of context you feed into a query is very high. So you're trying to make it think about a lot of things at once. And so it's better if you think about the steps you want it to do, just put it into steps and get it to do it like a step. And then the output of that step becomes the input of the next step. And if you do that, it narrows the context. And I think you'll reduce your hallucination.
But even because Notebook now has a revised slide function where you say, and it can be pretty good. Sometimes it fixes it. But I'll type revised slide and say, change this number from 50 to 60, and it still won't do it. You can't get any more simple than that. Like I'm giving it a simple change number direction, and it can't do it. So there's clearly just some flaws in it. But generally, it's something we use it as a fraud engine, for example. It's way better than any other fraud engine we've ever had. It's reduced our fraud close to zero because we can just feed it with all these inputs. So obviously, it's great for customers.
Because patterns, fraud is all patterns, right? And it's a pattern recognition engine.
100%. Our voice AI has gotten down to 3% error rate, which is pretty incredible. It was
incredible,
like 50%. So it's now solving 14% of queries over the phone. So there's some great uses for it. Neither of us are anti. You're much more pro than me in your day-to-day.
We think AI is very useful. It's very good. It's transformative.
Same as the airplanes. Airlines. What's not good is these companies not having competitive advantage. And Firmus is like nowhere on the stack of competitive advantage. It claims to have this cooling tech, which doesn't have.
Well, they would say their real competitive advantage is getting deals to get
Nvidia
power.
Deals. 100%.
Right?
Well, no, Nvidia deal, there's a competitive advantage.
Well, no, but Nvidia is going to give everyone a deal because Nvidia deals are great.
Chips. Nvidia doesn't give everybody the chips, though. People have to beg for these chips from Nvidia at the moment, anyway.
Well, I'm much more cynical than you. If Nvidia gives you $20 billion and you've got to spend it on Nvidia chips, that seems a pretty great way of turning your balance sheet into income to me.
Totally, but Nvidia doesn't give everybody $20 billion to buy its chips. It gives a few people $20 billion.
But so what historically these data centers, I'm not just going to call them neoclouds, data centers, because the traditional data center operators sell to many more people than just these hyperscalers. I think that's the fundamental difference. Like when I'm going to characterize a neocloud, their predominant customer is the hyperscaler, and there's all sorts of reasons. I always say this, the Iron deal, these were who the parties were involved in the Iron deal, okay? Nvidia, Microsoft, Dell, they were the parties involved, and Iron. Of all of those parties, who do you think is the least likely to be able to extract economic value out of that deal? I mean, it's just we know what that deal is and how it worked, and we know why Microsoft is doing it because they can't get enough chips themselves. Like, there's all sorts of games being played. I think in the past, people would say, well, they could get powered, and getting power is very hard. Number one, that is getting increasingly hard now. But number two, it turns out now that a whole lot of these deals to get power were phantom contracts that are not really linked to the build out of data centers that are imminently being built anyway. Like there's just so much dishonesty going on in the industry. These are my two issues. I've got one issue, and then I'm going to ask you a question with your airline analogy, which I know you say it's mine, but now you can make it yours. I'm going to ask you a question.
It is yours, Dennis.
The fundamental problem that I see when you used Anthropic as an example is this. Anthropic has now overpriced its tokens to its customers while underpricing its tokens for its own ability to make money. Like it's caught in the worst possible situation. Like they're too cheap to make a lot of money and too expensive for people to want to use in that kind of volume.
Which just shows why this business is doomed.
That's the economic
And you've got DeepSeek, and you've got the Kimi K and DeepSeek coming in for like 90% less cost. Like everybody's going to be moving to these as soon as there's a bit more heavy lifting involved, but we're certainly going to be moving across. I imagine your business is already halfway moved across.
Yeah, what you'll find is that as you break stuff down into steps, the sophistication required to solve each step in general is actually quite low. You don't need these frontier models. You can use vastly less complex models. You can use models that take less tokens, or you can run locally. Like that's where the world is going. But this is my question. So in the industry, you've got airlines, and you've got aircraft manufacturers. Now, airlines, there's a few profitable ones now, but airlines are buying other people's aircraft, and then they're providing a service on the back of that. It's a complicated service, but a service. Aircraft manufacturers, you've got Airbus and Boeing, the two big ones, but you've got people like Embraer and Cessna and a whole lot of other ones as well, and military manufacturers. You think that you can continue the analogy in this and say there's aircraft companies and airline manufacturers? Sorry, there's aircraft manufacturers and airlines? Can you think about it like that?
I think that's a pretty good analogy. Like Boeing and Airbus, and there's a Chinese version as well. I forget the Chinese company, but they're really a they're a duopoly, and they've got backlogs, thousands and thousands of aircraft backlogs. They can't keep up with it.
They're a duopoly for big planes.
Yeah, I'm talking about big planes. I'm not talking about the private stuff.
But not just private. Like there are commercial manufacturers like Embraer, for example. And so
Embraer's the Brazilian third competitor. Yeah, they do passenger jets. A bit smaller.
Yeah, they do, like the Embraer 190. It's flown by Australian Airlines and by Qantas, certainly.
It's like 100-seater, right?
Yeah, it's a smaller plane. But my point is this. There's lots of aircraft manufacturers like Bombardier. Like there's lots of them that have found a way to make money. And then you've got these airlines, which their biggest expense is leasing these planes and then buying all the fuel and stuff. And they have to provide a service built on a platform of the hardware of other companies. And I feel like there is some analogy in this industry where you're going to have all of these companies that buy infrastructure from existing large players and then build their own unique models or services on top of them. And when I look at a company like OpenAI and I go and fast forward 10 years into the future, they're going to be very unlikely that they're the aircraft manufacturer of the industry. And I think that like the services that are being provided are more likely to be very niche specific high value services to particular industries than these catch-all generalists. That's what the future kind of looks like to me. And so I think it's easy to bet on Alphabet. It's easy to bet on Amazon. I think ultimately they'll start looking like a hybrid of the aircraft manufacturer and the airline in ways that break down the model a bit, the analogy. But I think that what we'll see in 10 years is a whole lot of niche, very specialized service providers that are servicing individual industries with quite precise solutions for those industries. And that they're the airlines, basically.
If you look at airline manufacturers, so Boeing and Airbus, the big ones, they've got incredible process power. Nvidia, incredible process power. Great quantity resources. They've got so many powers, so which is why you want to be a manufacturer, which is why obviously Boeing's had huge issues, and they cleaned out. Boeing basically merged with McDonnell Douglas, got rid of all the engineers, put the finance people. So they stuffed it up. They're still a very valuable business. Airbus has been a great story. They're also somewhat lacking competence in many ways, but still incredibly valuable business. So it's hard to see that anything happening to these guys. But the airlines, they've done well now because they've become finance companies, but they've had 100 years of hell. So I think that, funny enough, you talk about peak kind of AI bubble. I reckon the peak AI bubble is what happened last week when Adir, you mentioned Adir, and the two founders, Macquarie Bankers Dan and Will Roberts, already have $1 billion worth of Adir stock. They were granted another $1 billion of Adir stock. Literally, it's restricted stock. All I got to do is hang around for 6 years. They get another $1 billion. This is Elon Musk times 10.
Well, they have to hang around for 6 years. Their company has to not go broke for 6 years. That's the bigger obstacle, I think, to this grant. And so,
but they don't think they're going to go broke. Like clearly, if they did, they wouldn't
I understand. Yeah. Listen, I think that's the fundamental difference to me between Iron and Firmus, just looking from the outside, is that the Iron founders just spent a lot of personal capital. I mean that not in terms of dollars, but reputational capital, let's call it. They just spent a whole lot of reputational capital on a 6-year bet that requires them to fundamentally believe in the business's future. Whereas like Daddy Firmus, he just sold down $100 million of his son's company,
150.
Right?
Yeah.
So 150. And so I think to me, at least you can say about the Iron founders, they seem to be drinking their own Kool-Aid, which is something, right?
Is that a good or a bad thing? I don't know exactly where that sits on the stack.
It's higher integrity, because if they go down, they will go down in no way as being shysters. I mean, I think that Grant was a bit excessive, to say the least. But
I'm not calling them shy. I'm not calling them shysters,
I know you're
but
not.
This is pretty outrageous, though. To give yourself $1 billion for simply hanging around when you've got $1 billion. Like their excuse was, an Iron spokesman said, we're designed to attract, retain, and motivate high-caliber leaders. Well, I'm pretty sure you're going to retain guys who have $1 billion stake in the business
agree.
without having to give them another $1 billion.
I totally. But, greed, like in the 80s, with the Wall Street movie, they said greed is good. You had to say it like explicitly. Now, no one wants to say that because like the pitchforks will come after you.
Do you know who said that in the first place? He didn't use exact words, but do you know who said that where Michael Douglas's speech came from? It was a real person.
I'm going to guess and say it was, who's the junk bonds dude? Was it him? Michael Milken?
What?
No.
He was a guy who was associated with Michael Milken.
Let me have another guess. Ivan Boesky?
Ivan Boesky died recently.
Got it.
The insider trader. He didn't say greed is good, but he said something along those lines at a commencement speech.
Definitely we're in the era of unbridled lust for money right now. That is the era that we're in.
I actually don't. I'm not saying that there's some people don't have that, but we also live in a world of the giving pledge where I think there's also a greater social contract between very rich people and the community. And you look at Mel and Cliff from Canberra, great examples of this. They've repeatedly talked about giving away most, if not all, their wealth. So I think there is a greater understanding of the need to be mindful of what. And Elon Musk maybe is a little bit different category here. I think he wanted wealth for a scoreboard, not to spend it.
Ego purposes. Well, that's
ego
most
purposes.
people. That's most people.
Yeah.
But the reason I say it is because of this. So I've thought about recently the fall of Bitcoin. Bitcoin's fallen, right? And remember, we have these long discussions. What does Bitcoin correlate to? And the answer is the closest thing I worked out was when the Nasdaq is frothy, it's even more frothy. It's like an option you take on.
It's purely correlated to equities. Yeah.
But the Nasdaq has done really well, and Bitcoin has done badly. And this is my new theory on Bitcoin. All of these young people think there is no way to get ahead, so they need to gamble. And Bitcoin, that was a great thing to gamble on. But now it turns out there are better things to gamble on that look more substantive. SK Hynix, the Korean memory company, you can gamble on that. SanDisk gone up 17x in 1 year. You can gamble on that. I think there are so many things to gamble on.
Or Polymarket and Kalshi, real gambling. So,
there are so many alternatives for the fast buck right now without having to work. You don't need Bitcoin for the fast buck anymore. There's too many good AI options for the fast buck. And so,
plus you've got MicroStrategy, which was MicroStrategy was a big marginal buyer of Bitcoin. People forget how it was like 3 to 4% of Bitcoin's Michael Saylor's business. Me and Matty Dellavedova had the famous bet on what will happen to that business. We could never come to a financial bet, so we got an honor bet, which I'm currently well ahead of with Matty. He might have an NBL ring, but I think I'm going to take this bet out. But I think the fall of strategy, because strategy is a pure Ponzi scheme that is being unwound now. And that has had a big impact on Bitcoin price for sure, because it's selling Bitcoins now to pay its dividends.
So I think we are in a world that is completely dominated by greed still. And my view of Firmus, by the way, there's still plenty of time to get in and out of the AI trade and find the biggest sucker. I don't have the stomach to do it, but there will be people, I do not encourage this, by the way, but there will be people that today go and buy something in the AI world, and I suspect will still have the time to 10x their money before the crash. I'm not sure what it is you should buy. I mean, I don't think you should buy any of that, but so what we're seeing,
I think that window, if you traded Firmus at 100 million was a great bet, because if you can somehow get out now, you have 150 extra money. I don't think any of this stuff now, you're better off going to the casino, I reckon.
Maybe Firmus,
basic coin flip stuff. No, I'm talking about Firmus. I'm talking about all this stuff.
I think there's still.
I'm not saying it won't go up, but I think it's now at the point where it can equally go up and down. Whereas the bet in Firmus at 100 mil was actually a great bet, because the asymmetric upside, regardless of what you think of all the guys involved, and right, good or bad or whatever, it was a great bet, and it was a smart bet. And my bet may not work, by the way, but it was a smart bet. Now, all this stuff, it feels like the smart money's basically exiting. Like Tim Curtis selling Firmus. How smart is this guy? This guy knows his stuff. 150 million out. He's just dominated. So I think the smart money is now starting to get out. Sailors selling Bitcoin. All this bubble is reaching its epoch. and it's a matter
Yeah.
of time now. Like we always,
Well,
you and I get
maybe.
it too early every time, but I think we're starting. Feels like we're starting to get pretty close to the end.
But
The financial bubble.
The Iron founders, they should be looking at ways to liquidate their existing stock, not getting more stock, would be my suggestion to them.
Can I just move on to a final story? I've had a long episode, but this is a pretty interesting one. The AFR had a great yarn on Sam Buckingham-Jones is a great media reporter discussing the unfolding disaster at Ticketek, which has proven to be one of the worst private equity investments in decades in Australia. Last week, Ticketek fired former Woolworths CEO and I think McKinsey consultant Brad Banducci after a calamitous 13 months running the ticketing business. The business is now hemorrhaging money. It lost $160 million in 2025, $100 million the year before. Admittedly, this is probably a lot of interest payments, but still, even if it's breaking even, this business was bought for $1.3 billion. And the reason for its follies is the group lost 2 high-profile stadium contracts and is burdened by $1 billion in debt. The AFR reported that Banducci's grand strategy to turn around TEG included hefty investment in AI, funnily enough, and machine learning, a loyalty program, and new tech features. Unfortunately, Ticketek is at its core a sales business, and something former CEO Jeff Jones, who's this incredible, he's not a founder, but he's effectively like a founder, was the master of these relationships, and Banducci is just a consultant, had no idea how to do it. Apparently, Banducci never spoke to the stadium's people and ultimately lost the contracts. What Brad did do was hire a bunch of expensive former Woolworths staff, and the AFR claimed that a dozen people who worked at Woolies or Woolies X joined the entertainment company as AI and machine learning engineers. In the 13 months, Banducci helmed the business. TEG lost the multi-decade Venues New South Wales contract. They do, of course, stadiums in SEG, Allianz, to Live Nation, their nemesis. It also lost the Rod Laver Melbourne Park Arena contract to AEG. This is an absolute disaster. I'm not sure. Do you know the background, how TEG was formed? I didn't know. This is super interesting.
Oh, I dealt with them ages ago. Wasn't Channel 9 involved in this business in some way? Is that who sold it?
Yeah, it was owned by Channel 9. It was owned by Channel 9.
That's
Do you know
right.
why it was started?
Because Ticketek was owned by maybe E Corp.
So you think, so that Ticketek is TEG, same business. So there was effectively Bass. Remember Bass sold tickets?
Yes.
Like there was I think that became Ticketmaster.
Yep.
But TEG was founded by Kerry Packer in 1979 to sell World Series tickets. Because remember, he was the rogue.
Oh, that's why. Because I remember the
Super League.
Back in the .com boom, the last boom of this. God, I hope there's one more boom before I die. Because I promise you by the next bubble, I'm going to have worked out what to do. When I think that it's all over, I'm going to go and invest all of my money in the bubbliest of bubbliest shares and just let them go up 50x. So, but I remember in the .com boom, Ticketek was owned by E Corp, which is the 9 PBL
Daniel Petrie
vehicle,
was running it.
run by Daniel Petrie and with Ellison Deans there. And
absolutely.
And so I remember when I could never really figure out why Ticketek was owned by E Corp, but until this moment, I didn't realize that it had been set up to Ticketek was set up to sell World Series cricket tickets. Oh, that's funny.
Absolutely, which is fascinating. So it was a great business, and then obviously it was massive as part of E Corp. Came back into Nine. Nine obviously IPO'd in 2013, and then it spun out the Ticketek business, the TEG business. It was bought by Affinity, the Hong Kong-based private equity firm. They also bought Velocity, the frequent flyer business. They then did an unbelievable trade, selling to Silver Lake for $1.3 billion. Jeff Jones ran it through all this period. He was just the master of all this stuff. He was the king of this business. He was he had his long-time consigliere, Cameron Hoy, who was looked over in favour of Banducci, which clearly was the wrong call. Now Cameron's been put in as CEO belatedly, clearly too little too late. Even worse, TEG is now in talks with Silver Lake to raise hundreds of millions of dollars in fresh capital, which basically implies this business is bankrupt or close to being bankrupt. Because private equity firms don't like putting money back in 6 years after buying a business. That means they're only doing it because they think the business is dead otherwise, and they can't raise money or sell it. So this is a disaster. Do you have any views on sort of what lessons can we take from this mess?
I had some interactions with TEG some years ago because I think they have a panel business or something that they make available, like for research. You can get a panel from them or marketing or something. I've always found ticketing to be a bizarre business. This idea that says that if you go to a stadium as an entertainment act, you don't get to choose who sells the ticket to your entertainment because the stadium has made a deal with some other party with a guaranteed economic structure. It's just a weird industry. Well, who has the power in this relationship? Is it the stadium that ultimately has the power?
Yeah, it's actually terrible. Like they make a lot of money. Look at Live Nation, which is really vertical. They own everything. So Live Nation owns the ticketing element, which is really actually a small sliver. They also own the stadiums, they own the promoters. So Live Nation's fully vertical, which is why they tried to, the US, I think that whatever, the Justice Department tried to break them up because Live Nation owns Ticketmaster. But the actual ticketing component is actually a really pretty bad business. You've got to pay, and talk about competitive advantage, they have very little competitive advantages because you've got to pay stadiums this huge, what they call key money. So you'll go to venues in New South Wales and pay them $1 billion over 10 years and then have the rights to then clip the ticket every time somebody buys something. So they're semi-technology businesses, but tech isn't really tech. They're really kind of, they have long, like this upfront massive cash cost and then just clip the ticket over a long, so it's not a business it's a really great business, to be honest. I think both Nine and Affinity did a great job selling this business and getting the.
You know what I'd call this model? I'd call this a rights model. This sounds like a rights business. You buy the rights for something, you pay a lot of money, commit a lot of money, and you try and make it back on the back end. And this is how every media business buys live sports. They buy the rights. Like the NRL just sold their rights for $5 billion. And then it's like, well, how the hell do we make back this $5 billion? Well, we got to sell ads. And then you start with that. And like basically your skill is you're arbitraging. So you buy the rights, you have your own platform, and then you try and sell ads on it. And the platform in the case of sports rights is distribution. Like you want lots of people to come, but effectively people are going to come anyway because they want to watch the NRL, for example, or the AFL. I think the AFL will have a bigger rights deal. And in this case, you're just a tech platform and the act, that's down. The crazy thing about this is in sports, you're buying the right from the actual entertainer and you're trying to sell that downstream. And here, you're not even buying the rights from the entertainer. The entertainer's going to come into the thing you bought the rights from. And so...
Yeah, the sports analogy is not... Like there's a small element of analogy, but the difference is, and you sort of touched on it, but like if I'm Channel 9 and I'm buying, or Channel 7, I'm buying the rights to the AFL, I'm getting these viewers to my station and on the basis they're going to watch other stuff. And I'm going to somewhat at least semi-own that customer. So that's why people use called 10 polls. They buy the Australian Open to launch.
Yes, there's ways to monetize. It's an acquisition tool. Yeah. It's not just arbitrage, it's acquisition. But no, there's another benefit as well, which is when I buy the NRL or the AFL or the EPL in Australia, English Premier League, like I know the entertainment that I'm buying and I can price what I think the value of that entertainment is. When I go and do a deal with a stadium, now I'm completely dependent on who decides to go and perform in that stadium.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't even know what I'm buying. And by the way, the fact that the way that these companies like Ticketek has tried to do more than arbitrage and turn it into actual acquisition is by whacking Rocked and businesses like that on the back of it to try and secondarily monetize the customer.
Well, they're also, TEG also, and obviously Live Nation's done it more, but you really got to be vertical. That's why Live Nation's vertical. So Live Nation's clearly, Live Nation is actually really super smart. They've seen the exact issue you're talking about. And they've said Ticketmaster, which they own globally, is just this small sort of small cog in this big wheel, and we're going to do all it. We're going to own the acts. We're going to own the stadium. It kind of makes sense when you're fully vertical, and then you can start ripping off. Then the reason why Ticketmaster, Live Nation has been successful is they can basically rip off the artists, and they have the power to do that, or rip off the more over, not so much the artists, more rip off the customers as well. Whereas Ticketek isn't vertical enough to do that, which is why they're struggling more.
Yeah, agreed.
That's a great finish to the week. Thank you, Adir, for another great episode. We were back on I'm going to announce our quick, as you know, our fabulous weekly winner. So if you subscribe to multiple platforms, so you obviously subscribe to listen to the show, but also subscribe to our fantastic newsletter. I wrote a great article. I think it was a great article this week on what I think tax changes should happen. So I talked about having a much higher GST, having much lower income tax. Have a read of that if you get a chance. And it's a good friend of the pod, Tim Rosanis, who of course now is running Turo in the US, is our weekly winner. So congrats to Tim. Who's
so crazy.
The pod. Probably Tim doesn't really need the voucher, but we'll give it to him anyway because he obviously did do the right thing and subscribe to multiple platforms. So congrats, Tim. Thanks for the support. Tim was one of our very first listeners. Actually, has been super loyal throughout. So super grateful for that. And I think maybe who knows the causation here, but Tim's now got a massive job running Turo almost globally. So it's that's what happens when you listen to Contrarians. You get these big exec jobs. So there's a great tip. So well done, Tim. Thanks for subscribing. We'll be back. We're going to do a special episode this Saturday a deep dive episode. We know how much people love our deep dive. So Adir and myself will deep dive into Bending Spoons, which is a really interesting Italian-based NASDAQ listed business. So that'd be super exciting. So don't forget to listen on Saturday. Thank you for listening in. We'll see you soon.